Chapter 7: The Immortal Legacy. The Qin Dynasty collapsed in fire and rebellion. Its palaces burned, its emperors disgraced, its officials hunted down. To the rebels who brought it down, Qin was remembered as a nightmare, a tyranny that crushed the people under laws sharper than swords. And yet, when the smoke cleared and a new dynasty arose, its rulers made a remarkable choice. The Han Dynasty, born from the ruins of Qin, denounced the first emperor with their words, but with their actions, they embraced his system. The founder of Han, Liu Bang, began life as a peasant, a man of the soil. He had once cursed Qin's harsh laws, once fled from its conscription, once raised the banner of revolt. But after victory, standing in the conquered Qin capital of Xianyang, Liu Bang saw something few others recognized. Behind the cruelty, Qin had built a machine of power unmatched in history. A centralized bureaucracy, a legal code that bound millions, a system of commanderies and counties that stitched together a vast empire. For all its brutality, Qin's design was brilliant, and Liu Bang, the rebel who became Emperor Gaozu of Han, understood that to rule China, he must inherit what he once fought to destroy. So while Han rulers condemned Qin's excesses, they kept its core institutions intact. The title of Emperor, Huangdi, remained. No ruler ever again dared to call himself merely king. The central bureaucracy continued, with officials appointed by the throne rather than local aristocrats. The commandery and county system endured, becoming the backbone of Chinese governance. The legal framework, though softened, was preserved. Harsh punishments gave way to lighter penalties, but the principle remained. Law was the instrument of imperial control. In the end, Qin's system outlived Qin itself. It is one of history's great ironies. The Han Dynasty rose on the promise of rejecting Qin's tyranny. Rebels shouted slogans of liberation. The people will no longer be slaves. But once in power, Han emperors found themselves seduced by the same logic that had guided the first emperor. Absolute power required absolute structure. Without central authority, the empire would fragment back into chaos. And once a throne had tasted the efficiency of legalist machinery, it was impossible to give it up. So the anti-Qin, Han became, in truth, a new Qin, only gentler in its mask, wiser in its balance of fear and favor. Here lies the paradox of Qin's legacy. The dynasty itself was short-lived, collapsing in just 15 years. But the system it built became immortal, shaping every dynasty that followed. The Han carried Qin's framework forward, blending legalist control with Confucian ideals of virtue. It was a softer version of the same machinery, one that could endure for centuries rather than years. The Qin dynasty was gone, but the first emperor's shadow stretched across the ages. But Qin's legacy did not stop with Han. Every dynasty that followed, from Tang to Ming to Qing, would wrestle with the same temptation, to embrace the methods of the first emperor, to wield his architecture control in their own names. When Qin collapsed in 206 BCE, many believed its tyranny had been buried forever. Yet history had other plans. Time and again, new dynasties rose promising justice, moderation, or reform. And time and again, their rulers, once rebels, generals, or visionaries, found themselves seduced by the same temptation, to rule like Qin Shi Huang. Every founding emperor faced the same dilemma. Do you share power with nobles and ministers, risking chaos? Or do you centralize power in your own hands, ensuring order through fear? The choice was almost always the same. For in the seat of power, ideals fade. Efficiency and security matter more than philosophy. And the fastest way to secure an empire was to imitate the system that Qin had pioneered. Thus began what we might call the Qinization of dynasties, the process by which every new regime in China gravitated back toward the autocratic model of the first emperor. The Han Dynasty softened Qin's harshness, but beneath the Confucian rhetoric, its machinery remained legalist at heart. The emperor stood supreme. The bureaucracy served the throne. The law bound the people. Confucianism became the empire's moral mask. But Qin's system was its skeleton. The Han lasted 4 centuries, not because it rejected Qin, but because it learned to cloak Qin in gentler clothing. Later dynasties tried variations. The Tang dynasty celebrated culture and cosmopolitanism, yet its emperors retained Qin's centralized bureaucracy and imperial authority. The Song dynasty emphasized civil officials over military generals, expanding examinations to recruit scholars. But even here, the ruler's authority was unquestioned, and the machinery of Qin persisted. No matter the reforms, the gravitational pull of autocracy always pulled China back to the Qin model. By the Ming and Qing dynasties, the cycle was complete. The Ming founder, Zhu Yuanzhang, had risen as a rebel monk against the Mongol Yuan. Yet once in power, he built a system of surveillance and punishment that rivaled Qin's brutality. He distrusted ministers, executed thousands, and expanded the secret police. His reign was hailed as a rebirth of order, but in truth, it was Qin reborn. The Qin emperors, foreign conquerors from Manchuria, faced the challenge of ruling a vast Chinese population. Their solution? To adopt the very institutions of Qin: central bureaucracy, codified law, rigid hierarchy. By wearing the mantle of the first emperor, they legitimized their rule as part of China's eternal pattern. Why did this happen again and again? Because Qin's system was self-replicating. Once centralized power is established, it becomes the path of least resistance. Each dynasty feared chaos more than tyranny, and each ruler discovered that to survive, he had to wield the same tools of control. In the end, the system outlasted its creators. Dynasties fell, but the architecture of Qin endured. From the ashes of Qin to the palaces of the Ming and Qing, every dynasty carried the first emperor's DNA. They cursed him as a tyrant, but they lived in his shadow. They promised to be different, but they became the same. For 2,000 years, Chinese history was not just the story of dynasties rising and falling. It was the story of Qin being reborn again and again. But Qin's legacy was not only political. It also reshaped Chinese culture itself, embedding the idea of unity, hierarchy, and strongman rule deep into the collective imagination. An empire can collapse. A palace can burn. A dynasty can vanish in a single generation. But ideas can endure for millennia. Perhaps the most lasting legacy of the first emperor was not his walls, not his armies, not even his terracotta legions. It was the way he reshaped the Chinese imagination, planting seeds of thought that would define the relationship between ruler and people for 2,000 years. This was the cultural DNA of autocracy. Before Qin, China was not one land but many states divided by dialect, culture, and custom. Unity was a dream, spoken of by philosophers but never achieved. Qin Shi Huang changed that. By crushing the 6 kingdoms, by standardizing script, currency, and law, he transformed unity from aspiration into reality. From then on, the idea of the Tong, great unity, was burned into the collective consciousness. A divided China was seen as weak, chaotic, shameful. A united China, under one ruler, became the ideal. Even when dynasties fell, rebels did not call for independence. They called for a new dynasty to rule all under heaven. The very language of legitimacy was Qin's creation. Hand in hand with unity came another idea: the belief in the strong ruler. The first emperor had shown what one man, wielding absolute authority, could accomplish. He ended centuries of war, forged an empire, and left monuments that still stand today. To many, this proved that only a strong man could guarantee order. Better a tyrant than chaos. Better a harsh ruler than endless warlords. This cultural logic repeated across dynasties. Each founding emperor was measured against the first emperor's standard. Each was tempted to become a new Qin. Even in popular memory, Qin Shi Huang became both feared and admired, a villain in morality tales, yet secretly revered as the man who got things done. But perhaps the deepest legacy was how Qin reshaped the individual's place within the state. In the feudal world before Qin, loyalty was fragmented to family, clan, or local lord. The state was distant, secondary. Qin destroyed that. Through law, registration, and surveillance, the state became the primary reality. Each person was not just a son or farmer, but a numbered household, a subject of the emperor. The bond between individual and ruler became direct, bypassing all intermediate ties. The emperor was not just above society. He was the center of it. This redefined the Chinese political psyche. The state as family, the ruler as father, the people as children. A relationship of obedience, dependence, and submission. Here lies the paradox. Qin's dynasty was short, but its ideas were long. They became the default setting of Chinese governance, reproduced generation after generation, dynasty after dynasty. This is what we call institutional inertia, the tendency of systems, once established, to perpetuate themselves. Even when people curse tyranny, they inherit its assumptions. Even when dynasties fall, they rebuild on the same foundations. Yet history is not destiny. Choices still matter. Moments of openness, reform, and resistance have challenged the Qin model. From the Confucian scholars who sought virtue, to reformers who envisioned a different relationship between ruler and ruled. But the shadow of Qin has always loomed large, reminding China, and perhaps the world, of the enduring seduction of absolute power. The true ghost of the first emperor was not in his tomb or his statues. It was in the mindset he left behind, the conviction that unity is sacred, the acceptance that strong men are necessary, the belief that individuals exist to serve the state. This was Qin's final conquest, not of land or armies, but of imagination itself. And so, more than 2,000 years later, the question remains, was this legacy inevitable, the weight of history pressing down like fate? Or was it a series of choices, made and remade by rulers and people alike? In our conclusion, we will return to this eternal question. Why has the ghost of the first emperor endured so long? And what warnings does it still whisper to us today? Conclusion. The eternal question. We began this story with a question. Why did the system of absolute power, created by Qin Shi Huang over 2,000 years ago, endure for so long? The man himself died, his dynasty collapsed, his palaces burned, and yet his ghost lingered, not in body, but in the institutions, the ideas, and the temptations that shaped Chinese history for 2 millennia. The first emperor's legacy offers a double-edged lesson. On one side, his success. He ended centuries of war. He built the foundations of centralized rule. He forged the idea of a unified China that endures to this day. On the other side, his failure. His empire crumbled in just 15 years. His tyranny bred rebellion. His paranoia hollowed out the very system he sought to perfect. It is this paradox, a brilliant system that was both irresistible and unsustainable, that defined his place in history. Why, then, did every dynasty that followed return to his model? Because absolute power is tempting. For an emperor, it is easier to silence dissent than to debate it. It is easier to command loyalty than to earn it. It is easier to rule through fear than to trust. The first emperor demonstrated the terrifying efficiency of such power. And once seen, it cannot be unseen. Every ruler after him faced the same choice, and most chose the path he blazed. But history also offers a warning. Absolute power may build fast, but it burns out faster. It creates monuments that dazzle, but systems that crack under their own weight. It promises eternity, but delivers only fragility. The Qin Dynasty was the proof, mighty enough to conquer all under heaven, yet too brittle to survive a single generation. And so, the ghost of Qin Shi Huang still haunts us. It asks us, do we admire his vision of unity or fear his obsession with control? Do we celebrate his monuments or mourn the human cost behind them? Do we accept the seduction of strong men or resist the cycle they impose? The ghost does not rest in his tomb of terracotta. It lives in every debate about power and freedom, unity and diversity, strength and justice. To understand the first emperor is not only to study the past, it is to confront the present and the future. For as long as humans crave order, as long as rulers fear weakness, the temptation of Qin Shi Huang will return. The question is not just why his system endured. The question is whether we, today, have learned his lesson. That absolute power may create empires, but it also destroys them.